I'm a fish biologist, so primarily I look at creeks. And when I think of habitat destruction, I think of things like construction of dams on creeks, blocks off access to the headwaters areas for steelhead and salmon. I think about cutting down trees alongside creeks. That's really been extensive throughout the Napa Valley. Taking out oak forests. So there used to be pretty extensive, like if you look back at the 1800s, the earliest maps and the earliest surveys of the valley had oak groves all over. And if you look at modern aerial photography, you find like little patches here and there, but really, it's little fragmented patches. And so those kinds of habitats basically been lost. Talking about a tree that takes a couple hundred years to mature, and unless you can really kind of get that back up and going, you're not talking about something you can restore in our lifetimes. Yeah, definitely. So imagine, if you look back historically at the way a creek was in, say, like 1900, 100 years ago, 110 years ago. Fish could basically migrate up from the Napa River into any of the creeks that they wanted to. When you put a dam in, you prevent that from happening. You prevent a fish from being able to get to where it wants to spawn. And a lot of dams are obviously they have other benefits, but from a wildlife standpoint, it's almost all negative. There's really nothing you can say that's good about putting in a dam. It's basically destroying that habitat upstream by creating the reservoir, and it also has a major impact on the habitat downstream. And then in addition, you talk about like taking out forests and oak woodlands and things like that. A lot of animals migrate from patch to patch, and birds and other animals that can easily go across great distances. It doesn't really affect too much, but you start talking about like red-legged frogs, which is an endangered type of frog, tiger salamanders, which we don't have here in Napa, but it's common around the Bay Area. These are animals that really need small, good habitat, small patches of habitat within a close distance. And so if you build a vineyard or a parking lot or something like that, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to us, but to a small animal, completely disconnects their habitat. And if you do that overall over the whole landscape, you end up with this kind of mosaic of little patches left here and there, but nothing really in terms of like actually supporting a big population. That's what's been lost. I mean, that's part of the reason we have endangered species, is because all those big patches have been turned into little patches. Yeah. So that's just the corridor concept, where you take a nice patch of habitat here and you take a nice patch of habitat here, and you just allow wildlife to get between the two. So if it's divided by a highway, you might have a crossing. Like they actually have amphibian and crossings for frogs and salamanders. It's mind-blowing to some people that we go to that effort, but like I say, a road is a pretty major barrier for a little salamander. And if you need to get them from point A to point B, you definitely would benefit them by doing that. Yeah, so right, exactly. If somebody has a piece of property and they say, well, let's preserve this piece of property, it's good in that sense, in that you're preserving that piece of property, but the less connections it has, it doesn't serve nearly as good of a purpose. If you can connect it to other properties, that's kind of where we're at now. If you look at the landscape now, there's just so much development. Setting aside huge pieces of property really isn't even an option anymore. So you have to kind of think, well, how can we do the most good? And that's usually by connecting pieces. Fish ladders, fish passage projects, which is something that we're involved with. So when you have road crossings across a creek, like they'll put in a pipe, and a fish won't be able to get upstream most of the time. You can take those out. We work a lot with private landowners that have little bridges that block fish. You take them out, you put in a fish ladder, let the fish go upstream. We've done a fair amount of that. Yeah, I think most of the laws that are in place now are definitely helping that. I think a lot of the destruction that we now see are legacy effects of just a different era. 40, 50 years ago, there was definitely there was concern for the environment, but there was more of a sort of a human only approach to the land. And I think as citizens we should do all the right things, including basic stuff: don't pollute, don't throw trash in creeks, participate in coastal cleanup days, creek cleanups, that sort of stuff. Get educated. That's the bottom line. I mean, when people know about this stuff, usually they do the right thing. So I think those are all good steps. And then professionally, organizations like mine and others around the county and around the state are trying to fix places, find places with landowners that actually want to fix creeks, that actually want to preserve their land, put it in the Napa Land Trust so it can't be developed, or restore like a stream bank and revegetate it and make it stable and nice. So. Yeah, I do. I think it is. I think it's a matter of educating people, and hopefully their priorities are, they realize that it's not humans versus the land. It's humans relying on that land, and if we destroy the environment that supports us, that's the end of the game. So I think it is possible. There's lots and lots of ways. So I'm like I say, I'm a stream person, so I tend to think about stream restoration. When you have a real steep stream bank or unstable stream bank with a lot of erosion, we go in and make them more stable. It looks ugly at first. We use big, heavy equipment and bulldoze the whole area, but then you replant it with native vegetation that's stable over 10, 15 years. In general, the approach nowadays is try to mimic nature. You find a place that's working well, has good, habitat qualities, has a lot of animals that you want, and you try to mimic that. So you plant the same species of plant. You remove exotic vegetation. You stabilize the banks, stream banks, and things like that. And there's just so much information out there on how to do it right now. I think it's been studied now for long enough, and now it's just a matter of doing it. Well, I think the ocean is a big, is a big unknown. It's it's because it really doesn't have ownership. So one country can't just say, let's protect the ocean. It has to be a cooperative thing, and that's really, really tough for everybody to come together and have the same viewpoint. So we have to be real careful with the ocean, and it's been getting worse and worse, degrading. It's becoming acidified through pollution. It's becoming overfished. It's becoming polluted. There's giant floating rafts. I don't know if you've heard about this. There's like a raft the size of Texas in the ocean just of garbage. So that kind of stuff that is impossible for one country to control and say, okay, we're going to make a law. It's difficult, and it's one of those things that affects us all. So
we can't undo it, really.
We can't undo it, exactly. I mean, it takes a long time. That's actually a lesson with all this stuff. So if you look at the destruction that's gone on, it takes an amazingly short amount of time to just hammer habitat, like ruin it completely, and it takes a long time, 30, 40 years to come back, maybe even centuries to come back, and so you got to be careful. Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, that's I think that's the goal of most of the agencies. They have that same goal, so I think you're right on track. The trick is finding the land and competing with money. I mean, that's the reason that these habitats have been destroyed. It's because they can make more money off that land, farming it or building a Walmart or whatever. And so the trick is to is to take that vision and find the right places and then do it.